Take three, and welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, June 14th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. And today we talk with Lori Townsend of the Alaskan Public Radio Network about some of the issues that they're covering in Alaska, always a state with a lot of news to offer up when it comes to Native news. Here we go to Lori.
Lori Townsend, Alaskan Public Radio Network is covering a lot of things going on in Alaska here the last few days. Give us a little bit idea of what we're going to find online if we go up to your station.
Well, Paul, there's been a lot of issues. One of the villages, Mountain Village in the lower Yukon area, is considering whether or not they should change their alcohol status to damp in their community, which would mean they've been dry for since 1984. And what this status change would mean is that they would allow an alcohol distribution center to be built in the community, the city would run it, and people can bring in a certain amount of alcohol that would then come into the center and then could be distributed to their homes. They could not sell it in the community. But the rationale behind the people who are petitioning for it is that there's already rampant bootlegging going on. People are paying upwards of $150 for a quart of cheap booze, and they just think that it would be better to have more controls on it. So we'll be watching that story to see how that unfolds and what the residents think and how they respond to this initiative. Another issue that's happening right now is with the Chicaloon tribe in south central Alaska here in the area. They're
trying to build a boat or something?
Well, they're actually upset with USibelli Coal Company because USibelli wants to access a coal deposit near Palmer in the Wishbone Hill area. And they have some permits to build some sort of pathway in, an exploration pathway, but they don't really have the permits that they need to build roads. And Chicaloon is opposed to that because it's in the area of not only where they hunt traditionally for moose for potlatches and ceremonies, but it's also close to Moose Creek, which is a creek that the Chicaloon people have worked very, very hard and spent more than $1 million restoring the creek so that, and it's been a very successful project. The creek was a historic area for salmon and was a fishing area for them, but the railroad changed the stream bed many, many years ago when companies were allowed to do things such as reroute streams, and it stopped salmon from coming up the Moose Creek to spawn. They've restored the stream to the original bed, and now they've got salmon returning there. So it was a success story, and they're concerned about impacts of that. The Chicaloon people are saying that upwards of 200 trucks a day could be going past tribal housing, and coal dust would be impacting the residents of the area. We haven't had that confirmed yet from USibelli, how much coal would be taken out of there, but that's a big concern in their area. Another issue that we're following closely is Unimac Island down in the Aleutian area, where Aleut people have hunted for caribou, have not been able to now for a number of years because there's restrictions on caribou hunting because of the number of wolf caribou calf kills, and the herd has been depleted. The state decided that they were going to go in, kill 7 wolves right away this spring to try to help the calves out when they're most vulnerable. But the federal government said, no, you're not going to do that because this is in a maritime refuge area, and we want to study this under the National Environmental Policy Act and spend a little more time reviewing it. So there was sort of a standoff. The state said, well, we're going to do it anyway, and the feds said, well, if you do, we'll consider your employees trespassers, and they ended up in court. The judge sided with the feds, although the judge did say that the state made a rational argument, and there is a desire to see things get moving, but he sided with the federal government saying he has to follow the law, and they do need to do this NEPA review. So that's another story that we'll be watching. The people in False Pass are concerned because they haven't been able to hunt caribou, and they said not only is it the subsistence aspect, but it's also the cultural implication of not being able to teach young people how to hunt. And so they were hoping for the predation program to go into effect, the predator control program, and that the state would be able to kill some wolves this spring. But now it's on hold, and we'll have to see how long that takes. Another story that we've been tracking this week is in the Bethel area, the Village Public Officer Academy has graduated the most students ever. 37 students just graduated. And these officers are somewhat different than VPSOs, Village Public Safety Officers. VPSOs are trained by the state. There's a lot of very intense training. The village village police officers are hired by tribes and villages. They don't have as extensive a training, and it's hard on people because they're oftentimes walking into extreme crises, and the burnout rate's very high. And so now this new academy in Bethel is offering better training so that people have the skills when they come onto the scene of extreme domestic violence or other sorts of traumatic issues, that they're trained so that they don't panic and that the outcomes will be much better. So this is a success story, and they're hoping to train more folks for more villages because it's a huge problem in rural Alaska that there's just not enough law enforcement in many of the villages. And oftentimes it takes troopers a day or several days, depending on the weather, to get to some of these places. So people are very vulnerable if some incident flares up in the community. And then really the biggest story of the day, just today, a quota was announced for polar bear harvest for both Alaska Native and Russian hunters in the Chukotka region of Russia. And this has been a long time coming. There hasn't been a quota. It's been 40 years since there's been a quota here, and 20 years of going back and forth trying to argue it out. And they finally came up with a quota. There will be the quota will be 19 females, 39 males. It'll be split between Russia and Alaska. And people are on board with the idea. They're happy to finally have something in place because the big problem has been poaching in Russia. And so they're hoping that having these rules in place will help kind of curb that, and people can have a legal harvest now.
It's interesting because border process of allocating some to the Soviet Union, Alaskan Natives.
Yeah, there's a commission that's formed. The Nanook Commission is Alaska Native hunters, and this commission that formed to develop the quota has representatives from Alaska Native organizations, from the Chukotka region of Russia, federal managers, state managers. And so the way it's been characterized is that there's a lot of buy-in, that people were supportive of it. It was tough to kind of hammer out the actual quota number. Hunters wanted a larger quota, and state and federal managers wanted a smaller quota, but they finally compromised and came up with something that everyone feels they can live with.
Okay, thanks. Where can people find you on the web?
They can find more information on these stories and others at aprn.org. That's Alaska Public Radio Network.org.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. If you want more information, go to our website at indiancountrynews.com. Thank you for joining with us. Come back again soon. Miigwech.